All right,
Looking sharp,
guys.
Tabalo. Did you do something different? You look good.
I shaved my head. I'm losing my hair, so I'm just getting ready to program myself to be bald.
It's
So
like, here's one of those things is like, it always looks better, right? People think it doesn't look good, but it does look good. If you
You
look at
look
like
much
Joe
older,
Rogan, well,
what?
and it's
wiser.
also like as soon as your head gets the color of like the rest of your skin, because it's gonna be really pale at first, it looks badass. Like it looks tough, it looks serious, it's a good look. So
Yeah, I'm not even worried. It's just like it's just interesting how like the social culture, like in men's health land, they attribute so much esteem to your hair. That's kind of like my
Hmm.
framing of it. That's why I shaved a lot of it off. Kind of.
I don't know. It looks good though, man.
I
Like
like it.
I'm
Yeah,
saying, just
it's
embrace it. Embrace it. It looks tough.
all right. So, philosophy club. What are we talking
Yeah,
about today? Um,
good
scarcity
question.
mindset, competition versus collaboration. What
Did
do you
you do
guys
the
want in
post
chat?
already?
Oh no, I didn't. You want to go ahead and drop that?
Yeah, I'm doing it now. Let me pull up Discord. I don't
Okay.
keep Discord open by default anymore. Oh, here's some sad news for you. Idea market's officially dead.
Oh
They
no.
died.
It's over. Yeah.
Is it because of that Arbitrum hack?
No, actually,
Okay.
fortunately, I
I, s-
guess.
I thought I feel like I sent something to you about that, but I don't remember if I did because I see too many
I
headlines.
I don't remember, but it may have been. If it was a long time ago, then it's entirely possible.
Not that long ago, like maybe a couple months.
Yeah, no, I don't remember honestly. But give me a sec.
All right,
It's
R.I.P.
big brain
Yeah,
Fallen man.
time
R.I.P.
again.
R.I.P. Well, I guess the stuff in my wallet's probably useless, but
You can sell it all now. You need to sell it all now. If you have anything, there's ways to sell it. Uh, so I would definitely do that as soon as possible before they shut it down. Shut it down. Um,
okay. It's sad to see them go.
I know, RIP, but it's the way that it works, man. And okay,
The crypto market is brutal.
that's yeah. It's I don't know. We don't need to get into that too much,
Well,
but I have my
and
thoughts.
positive news: the Yeetum app is in the iOS store.
No
That's
shit. Oh, hey,
Hey, that's awesome.
you should post a download link in general,
Yeah,
and I want to make sure that I remember to download that when I get out of here. But this is my phone, so I can't do it right now.
yeah,
Yeah,
do
we
it.
don't have account creation on there because I'm not paying Tim Cook 15%, but yeah, it's there. And now we can
Nice.
start iterating on it. So we got the client interface for mobile. We're going through the Play Store and then just kind of keeping value product
That's
information
awesome,
centered.
man.
Cool, man.
That is awesome. Let's see. I
Clip
want to do
it.
so. I have angle here, I guess. So I'm gonna just probably
9 a.m.
well, I
PST,
riff every
2
time, but this is
EST.
gonna be more riffy than usual. But so one of my clients, I've been is my single consulting client I've been working with for almost a year. It'll be a year actually when I left Idea Market because I started with them immediately
Let's
because
do
they were waiting.
10:30, Kama. Is that all right?
But so there's a company called Leaders Atlas. Leaders Atlas does
10:30 tomorrow.
basically they help leaders manage the morale of remote teams for the most part. So they work with like HP and IDC and some other a couple other big companies. And originally, I was brought on while I was at Idea Market to do philosophy sprints with them because Mike's wife Leah was their chief of staff, so she saw what I did with Mike and then suggested I do it with them. And then so I came in March after we did the sprints in like November 2 years ago, and we came in. I came in March and we worked on their sales deck and figuring out the narrative and stuff, and then I did a variety of other things. But basically, what they've got me doing now.
Uh-oh. Hey, I think your mic cut
Tom
off.
just tried to call me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's not my headphones, is
Yeah,
it?
no, John tried to call me because everybody decides to call me during
Dude, it's
this event every single time. Um, so so basically what they've got me doing now is building out a system to onboard new hires into the company philosophy, which is actually quite complicated and difficult. So I've never worked on anything like this before. Um, and so I've been thinking a lot about what a more functional angle to philosophy, because obviously I think philosophy is functional to the degree that I've staked my career on that assertion. But moving in the direction of trying to turn it into something that's tangible for people that aren't like either super intuitive or can't extrapolate like really abstract stuff like philosophy into action is a different thing. So basically, there's a couple different premises here. I think one of the first, and I say this to all my clients now. I came up with this in the last couple of months, but basically, why do we have company values? And I probably said this last week too, because we were looking at values. Why do we have company values? Values are how we decide what we care about. I mean, that's pretty straightforward, right? If you value free time more than you care about
your mic.
teamwork.
Oh wait.
No, I paused. I was thinking.
Okay.
If you value free time more than you care about like community, you'll probably not go to optional team building meetings, right? If you value money more than you value quality, you might try and make like the bare minimum quality product to make more money at the expense of making something great, right? And so there's always these sets of trade-offs. Every value that you make implies a trade-off. You're choosing X over Y, Z, A, B, whatever, right? Um, Typically, I suggest that people have somewhere between 3 and 7 values. I have 3. A lot of my clients have 7. Sometimes people fall in the middle, but usually it's more likely that people have 7 and less likely they have 3. Although I've had it happen a couple times outside of myself, right? And what I tell them is basically the word evaluate, meaning how we make decisions, how we decide things, has the root word value in it, right? You use your values as a way to evaluate what you should do. And so value that you make implies a trade-off. You're choosing X over. I can say I know how to use C#. I don't think that's related to what we're talking about. He's not in this chat. Okay, sorry. I'm gonna switch channels in here.
Yeah, go to the co-working chat here.
Yeah, can we get some more people in here?
If you go to the co-working lounge chat here, yeah, I'll get some more people in
Where's invite BU and
I already did. I think people are just busy today.
Michelangelo.
It's been a unique day. I already invited all them.
Okay, cool. Well, I won't spam them then.
Yeah,
But yeah. So values are how we make decisions. Everybody values a set of things, whether you realize it or write it down or not, right? And so it's important, and that's that is the first thing that I do with clients is we sit down and talk about your values because the values are everything, right? But there's a series of theoretical steps that you can go, and let's say that just naming your values is level 1, right? Okay, Tabalo, what are your company values?
Do you want like the formal, like what's on my website, or you want my on the fly answer?
Both, starting with on the fly.
Yeah, so the MO is just to promote what I say cyber and monetary or money consciousness.
Is that your mission?
I'd say that's our MO. That's the MO of my organization, the brand. Now the values, it's kind of like servant leadership, quality over quantity, uh, family abundance, knowledge seeking, um, and I can't have them outlined, but yeah. So it's like our principles: leadership by action, growth and innovation is a state of mind, quality over quantity, trust and verification are mission critical, community service and sacrifice, open source fosters innovation, education as a civic duty, um, and family abundance beyond capitalism.
These are good. Good shit. Okay, so that's Tabalo. Those versions are the ones that he's just stated are level 2. So they include the value and a definition, right? That would be what I consider level 2. So I do that with clients. I call them axioms. So typically I'll have one word values and then like a maybe less than a sentence, like a phrase that kind of explains the value in context. So a good example why you would do something like this is if, God forbid, your value is something like empowerment, right? Because it means very little in and of itself. You could say empowerment's a value. Okay, what are you empowering? Are you empowering like electric cars? Are you empowering people? Like, you know what I mean? So values by themselves are maybe the correct word, but the context isn't there. Level 2 of that, you have your axiom or your value statement is the simplified version of that. And the value statement is very much like what Topologist said. So open source powers innovation, right? The value would be open source. The value statement is it powers innovation, right? And this theoretically goes infinitely far, right? So the level 3, as far as I understand it, there's a sprint that actually somebody came up with at Leaders Atlas based off of the values that we came up with in the original sprints, which is called the values in action sprint. And the idea of this is you basically have 3 concentric circles. The inside is, what does this value look like when I'm doing it? The second circle is, what does this value look like when we're using it as a team? And the third circle is, what does this value look like when we're interacting with clients or customers, right? And so you start to see how we go from this abstract concept, like truth, like my values are truth, will, and love, right? In action, what do those things mean? Okay, well, and I have value statements for mine too, but they're complicated and involve like foreign languages, so I'm not going to get into it. But what does that look like in action? Truth. What does that mean personally? It's like pursue the truth, or the phrase for that one is lead me from ignorance to the truth. Is like you have an orientation to move from being ignorant towards the truth. You take more responsibility for stuff. If you understand how something works, you're responsible for knowing what to do about it, right? What does that look like with a team? Well, basically we have a shared orientation towards the truth. So if I am not honest, or if I'm not straightforward, or if I'm not fully disclosing information to people that I'm working with, then we're all going to be fucked up. What does that look like with clients? It's very much a similar kind of thing. Like, my job is not to lie to you. My job is not to tell you what you want to hear. My job is to tell you what I think, and you can take it or leave it. But if I'm not at least giving you the option to take it or leave it, then I'm failing, right? Will is this is the most complicated of the 3 to explain. So what does will look like personally? It's like, okay, well, the way that I look at will as a concept is like, this is capital W will. This is like the divine. All 3 of the truthful and love are like the divine forms of this. So like the divine notion of will is more like your purpose. If you understand who you are correctly, you're oriented towards your actual thing that you're supposed to be doing, right? If you work as an accountant and you hate accounting, you're not effectively utilizing your will, right? You're not doing what you were put here to do. And we could debate put here, that's up to your interpretation, but what you would be best served by doing, right? So what does will look like personally? That means, okay, well, I've pretty much played it out. If I work in corporate, I'm probably going to be miserable. There's not a job for me to do what I want to do, so I have to make my own job. And the best way that I can do that is to do the stuff that I think is important, which is business philosophy, design, yada, 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 right? What does that look like in the context of working with a team? It's, okay, when I'm, if I'm in a leadership role, like when I was chief of staff, my job is to figure out what is the specific job of everyone on the team, right? Where do they actually fit correctly, right? And Sam probably remembers this from Idea Market, where I think more than anyone, Sam's job scope changed repeatedly, right? Because it was like, okay, I know what Sam is good at, I know what he wants to do, and I know there's a correct place to get him put in, and my job is to help make sure that he ends up exactly where he fits, so that he's effectively utilizing the skills and talents and predispositions that he has, right? What does that look like with clients? That means that I'm trying to guide them in the direction that I think is best while not getting in the way of the direction that they think is best and what they're supposed to be doing, right? So it's more interesting with clients, I think, because clients don't always necessarily know who they are on a deep level. Not because they're clients. I mean, it's not. Yeah, some people know it better than anyone. Some people don't know it really well at all. But everyone has some innate ability to know it if you push them in the right direction. So with clients, I'm trying to get them to kind of align with like, what do you really genuinely care about? Who do you want to be? What kind of world do you want to live in? How do we act in such a way that you're moving towards the person that you want to be and the world that you want to live in through your work, right? And that's complicated. And in that regard, consulting ends up being a bit more like therapy or like mentorship in some ways. But if you're only doing that, you're not really doing the whole thing, right? So there's an element of that is that I want to help people think about these things that society and the culture and business culture don't really like want you to think or encourage you to think about, or they're not valued at all or talked about. So that people can kind of align with these meaningful parts of themselves, so that in the net result is the world gets more meaningful as more people connect to their personal sources of or universal sources of meaning, right? Finally, love. Love is pretty straightforward. Um, how do I like love as an angle personally is okay. Well, if you're not doing this in a way that you're like passionate about it and acting compassionately and acting, giving people the benefit of the doubt, acting, forgiveness and goodwill towards men, that kind of thing, then I'm doing something wrong, right? If I'm being an asshole to my clients, I'm not acting out of love. With a team, very much the same kind of thing. It's like assume, give people multiple chances, let people, assume that if somebody's not doing their job right, it's because they're not in the right place, not because they're the wrong person. Um, Ocean likes to say, she says this all the time, is that it's not difficult people, it's people having difficulties. I think that's a really good prerogative here. Um, and with regards to clients, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, to act out of service. My job is not to do what I want. My job is to do what I think is best in such a way that I'm serving the client. And that at the end of the day, if they're not ecstatic, we're not done. That's something I tell them routinely, right? Like if you're not thrilled, we're not done with the work, and we're not going to be done until you're thrilled, right? Um, so that's kind of an example of how you could take values a step further, right? But so that would only be level 3. And values, again, like I said, there's an infinite number of theoretical levels that you can go. And the more you have your kind of company philosophy fleshed out, the more you're going to basically, for what I've been saying to Leaders Atlas. So for context for everybody who just jumped in, I'm talking about what business philosophy looks like in a really robust way if you flesh it out. So historically, I do a little bit of this on the front end of companies to at least get their shit together and make sure they know how to talk about it. But I have a client right now that I've been working with for a long time that I'm trying to go further with and build out an onboarding system to teach new hires the company's philosophy, right? So basically, you have the 3 levels of values. You have the value with the definition, you have what does the value look like in action. But so one of the goals that I've set myself for this project, and I may or may not be able to achieve this in the first rendition of this, but the ultimate goal is basically that I don't want employees to be fluent in the company philosophy. I want them to be able to write poetry in it. So you can imagine the difference between knowing how to speak conversationally in Spanish and being able to write Spanish poetry that native Spanish speakers think is good, right? It's very different. That's a much higher level of fluency, right? So how do you get somebody to have a value instilled in them, right? You don't right off the bat. Almost, we looked at Microsoft last week, and Microsoft has 3 values that have one sentence about them on a page that is like very, very far away. It's very hard to find it. It's like hidden. They were bullshit values. The descriptions were vague. It's very clearly not something that they use routinely. And if you've looked at any of the stuff that's been going on with the Bing AI, it's kind of an asshole, and it's pretty obvious. Like, yep, Microsoft made the first asshole AI because they kind of suck a lot, right? That's what happens. And it's kind of hard to look at that and say, hey, maybe if they had their values thought out a little bit more and they used them, they wouldn't make asshole AI. it's correct. It's not the exact answer, but those things are very heavily correlated in kind of an abstract way, right? So when we're thinking about values, values need to be something that you go from, learning about, understanding, using, and internalizing, right? There's a concept in education that is basically the 4 levels of competence, or the 4 stages of competence, which are starting from 0, unconscious incompetence, which is I don't know that I don't know. So if I'm going to assume probably pretty safely that no one in here knows how to operate a submarine. Um, not only do you not know how to operate a submarine, but you didn't realize that you don't know how to operate a submarine until I said it, unless when you thought about being a submarine captain when you watched like Red Dawn or something. Not Red Dawn, Red October. Um, that's unconscious incompetence. You don't know that you don't know, right? You don't even know what goes into it. You've probably never thought about it for more than the amount of time that I've been talking about it just now, so like 30 seconds. Once you realize that you don't know something, you move from stage 1 to stage 2, which is conscious incompetence, right? So there are probably a great number of things that everyone knows that they're not good at. I won't try and get super specific with this, but if you never played piano and I sit here and talk about piano, you're going to realize you don't know how to play piano. Knowing that you don't know is the thing that allows you to be good at stuff. If you think that you know when you don't know, you will never learn, and you are going to be a nightmare to work with, and you're going to be very bad at everything that you do. So Socrates said, I know only that I know nothing. And he's kind of like a snide, snarky dude. So he's kind of being like a jackass when he says that. But that as a concept is actually a really good starting point. If you basically in Zen, they have this idea of beginner mind, which is that the person who is the best at doing things is the one who operates with the beginner mind, which is always operating from this position of I know that I don't know, conscious incompetence. And from this position, you're open to learning. You don't have preconceived notions about how things work. You don't have opinions that might be wrong. You don't have these mental blocks that are preventing you from learning, right? So as everyone's coming into the company and I'm trying to onboard them into the philosophy, they're starting out because the actual company philosophy is a bunch of like esoteric philosophical concepts from either like 1400 AD or like a couple, maybe 1000, 2000 BC. It's Atabiya, which is like this Islamic philosophy from the 1400s. Wang, which is like a very, very old Chinese philosophy of leadership. So I'm trying to teach these people stuff. They come in, they know nothing. They don't know that they don't know these things because they've never heard of them, right? They go through the beginning of this onboarding process and they get like an introductory deck that explains some of this stuff. And they learn, okay, I realize I don't understand what these things are, which is a good place to be. That's a really great place because that's where you start. Then the next stage of competence is conscious competence, right? So at this point, let's say you're learning how to skateboard and you just, you've been practicing doing a kickflip for a month and you've done a kickflip, but you have to think about it. You have to be 100% present. You have to think about the position of your feet and how much pressure you're applying with your legs or what. I can't do a kickflip or skateboard at all. So I am consciously incompetent here. I'm just riffing, right? But you have to, it requires your full attention to do it. You have to do it manually, basically. That's conscious competence. So what this would look like with values, and I think this is the issue, people tend to stop somewhere before we actually hit competence with these things. So you say in, whatever you're onboarding for Microsoft, maybe they say this, maybe they don't. They say, hey guys, well, we have 3 values and they're these things, moving on. And that's the last you ever hear about it. It's a bad place to be. So when you're becoming consciously competent, you need a framework or a system or a method or some kind of process that you can go through and say, oh, first I do A, then I do B, then I do B2, then I do C, whatever, and you work through it manually. If you're playing piano, the first time that you're playing a chord, you're like, okay, I need to put this finger here, and I need to put this finger here, and I need to put this finger here, and you have to do that really hard. And you have to like look at your hand, and you're like, okay, I'm doing it, and then your hand's cramping, and it sucks a lot for a long time. But eventually, you move to the stage of unconscious competence, and this is the place where you don't have to think about it. You're playing a song and your hands are just moving, and you're probably thinking more about like, okay, what chords do I need to play in order instead of where do I put my fingers to play these chords, because you've like memorized it and it's integrated, right? And then theoretically, there's even a fifth stage of this, which would be mastery, where you can break the rules because you know them so well, right? But we'll leave that one basically out because it's, you know, you got to work through the thing before you even get there. And if you get there, you're going to figure that out on your own. So if you're trying to get people to learn values, right? They're starting off, they don't know what your values are. If you just hired someone, they've never heard, you know, maybe they did some research on your company. People say they do it, they don't really. And honestly, I'd rather people just be honest about that than try and tell me, oh yeah, I've looked into your company, it seems great. It's like, no, you want a job, it's okay, we're on the same page, right? We're gonna have a relationship based on whether you're a good fit or not. But you telling me that you all this stuff is not super compelling for me, because that's what everyone's, you know, trying to say now. Cool, we hire him, we think this is a good fit, we're going to teach you about some of the values the company has. All right, when we're trying to move into that third stage of conscious competence, what this means is that for our values, we have to have a system for how you think using the values, right? Your values aren't just a decision-making tool, they're a mental model, right? Sam, what are some White Rabbit values?
Integrity, quality, community, engagement.
Okay.
I could pull up the Figma and read through
Yeah,
them.
that's fine. Let's start with integrity. So let's say that you have an employee, and first you're going to have to define what integrity means. So what does integrity mean to White Rabbit?
It means adhering to our mission and vision and values. I don't know. I feel like that's circular, but
That is a little circular.
maintaining, maintaining the quality of product and keeping the human element in what we do.
Okay, so let's say that's level 2. Level 1 is integrity. Level 2 is what you just said. Level 3, what does integrity look like in action for you, for your team, for your customers?
It means not automating anything that is building emotional connections with people, and man, I'm so tired. I was not expecting to answer this, but yeah,
right,
I mean, it means
doing
sticking to the interpersonal elements that make community so valuable. Building those experiences that hold to a brand standard, a brand, you know, are consistent with the branding and the messaging for those clients.
Okay, so that's level 3. That's what the values look like in action. Now let's play a game where we talk about level 4. So if you were going to come up with a checklist or a set of rules or a set of steps that you would use when you're teaching an employee to make decisions about whether or not something is, you know, being done with integrity or aligns with the company's definition of integrity, like what are some ways that you could just say, hey, guess what, new hire, you've got to make a decision today, and we gave you this handy checklist. You're going to think manually through this. Maybe it's a worksheet. You say, here's, am I doing X? Yes, no. How do I do Y? This is how I would do it. And then you make them manually think through, this is what I'm doing. And this is where, you know, it's helpful to have like acronyms or mnemonic devices or stuff that makes it easy to remember. Stop, drop, and roll is what this would look like if you're like fire, you know, fire safety is your value, right? Okay, you're on fire. What does it look like personally if you're on fire? Well, you stop, you drop, you roll. Cool. Okay, that's it. That's an understandable, comprehensible thing. You know what to do to apply this. And if you drill with that hard enough, then hopefully if you ever catch on fire, you won't have to think about it. You just stop, drop, and roll, right?
Right.
So what would be a way, and I don't need you to go super hard on this, but like, let's play that out. If you're trying to teach an employee how to make a decision with integrity, or what it looks like to make decisions with integrity in, let's say, 3 steps or 3 checks,
Okay.
what would the 3 things you want to check be?
Are we automating or avoiding talking to people face to face or in video? You know, are we avoiding that? Or I guess another one would be like these checks, are we copy pasting to everyone the same messaging? You know, is it unique? Are we looking at the personas? So going down the checklist would be like, Go back and look at the different personas. Is the copy you're writing unique for those different personality types and situations? And how are you adapting that to so it's unique in each conversation, personalized to that person's needs? Just what personalized means. But yeah, it's sort of the uniqueness of the interaction, but then at scale, like how do we do that for a whole community and make them all, see their participation as valuable without, but still keeping it systematic. So I guess in that checklist, when I'm training employees or training people to work with me, I really stress like the iterations, trying things and then improving them for the different types of personas, so that you have a different sort of style and tone based on the type of person.
Okay, that's a good answer. So we could look at that as that would be conscious competence. If you have a checklist that your employees are working through to make sure that I'm using this value every time I do anything, right? Cool. Well, let's say you work for Sam and you've done this 100 times. Well, now you don't need to look at the checklist, right? You memorize the checklist. You memorize that every time I do this, I go through these steps. Did I do this? Did I do that? Cool, great, awesome. It's perfect, right? A good example of this in Japan, in the high speed rail, the maglev trains and stuff that they have, right? One of the things that they make the employees do when they're doing their checklists is they have to physically point at everything that they're checking. And because they physically point at everything, they actually have to look at it because it makes your brain think about what you're pointing at, right? Because to aim your finger, you have to look at the thing, right? And so by requiring them to do that, they're not manually at that point anymore thinking, oh, I have to check this, I have to check that, or I have to pay attention so that I do this right. They're just trained. So, oh, yep, check, check, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it looks like when you reach unconscious competence, is you've internalized this system and you're fluent at that point. So that fifth level, which I would call mastery, there's a really good book by Robert Greene, who wrote many other wonderful books, 48 Laws of Power, Laws of Human Nature, Art of Seduction, Art of whatever, 33 Strategies of War. All of his books are good. But he wrote one called Mastery that's really, really interesting. And I think it's the most unique of all his books, that basically talks about, there's an idea in Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell that it takes 10,000 hours of practice to be perfect at something, to be the best at it, right? However, in Mastery, Robert Greene says, okay, what happens after 10,000 hours? What does the next 10,000 hours look like? And that's what he writes about in the book, is this notion of mastery, that you can break the rules, you can do whatever you want, you understand the thing better than anyone in the world, so you can kind of work with it. And so this is where, at this level, employees would be able to rethink the systems. Maybe in the process of learning it, they've found a better way to do it. Maybe they can innovate with it. Maybe they can change what they have to do depending on the context, because they understand it so well that they can play with it, right? Another quote that Ocean likes is, learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist. And I think that hits on a similar thing, right? So that's kind of what it, in a really broad sense, what it would look like to go from a value being an abstract concept to a value being something that you actively use all the time to make decisions, right? And this is where people, legitimately, I don't think people go this far. I haven't gone this far yet, and I'm the philosophy guy. It's not fleshed out at all, right? But if you're thinking about it, who or what does this really well? I would say probably religions, cults, ideologies do this really well. And this is not, this is a little bit of a darker turn, but I promise it's going to stay lighthearted. So if you join any of those three groups, let's just refer to them as a structured group, right? Well, that structured group has rules for how you participate. It has rules for what you do while you're doing stuff. Maybe they have rituals, maybe they have moral guidelines and stuff like that. And as you're participating in these things, you're internalizing why we do stuff. And maybe you do this thing and they explain why it's like that, and you do it some more, and then you get it, and then you can kind of explain it to people using different metaphors instead of just by the book. But that's ultimately like a strong company culture is, Peter Thiel likes to say that all startups are cults, and the successful startups are successful cults. And I think there's something to that in that regard, which is like the same way that you're building a company culture is the same way that you build a belief system, right? Because if you work at MLMs, they're excellent observation, because everyone knows what an MLM person is like. What do MLM people do? You send a bunch of spam messages to all your family and friends, and the ones who survive are the ones that ask other people that ask people that they're not related to, right? Most people will get through maybe 10 people. It's like people that they know, and they maybe convince them to buy a Cutco knife or like whatever the other Aveda, or I know there's a bunch of them. And then the ones that get past that learn how to do the sales and recruit people and all this other stuff. So
That's multi-level marketing, basically, in a nutshell.
yeah, that's
Tap everybody's 10-person network.
Well, so here's the thing I would tell you though. I was at Bed Bath and Beyond one time. This guy came up to me and said, "Hey, you look like an enterprising dude," and I was like, "This is weird. We're off to a weird start."
That's great.
And this is a long time ago, by the way. This is in like 2010. This is when I was working on the first business.
Looks like you like money, sir.
No,
let me take yours.
It wasn't that shady, but it was shady, right? And so I was like, okay, whatever, this is gonna be fun. So
you were in Bed Bath and Beyond. That sounds pretty freaking shady to say to somebody.
I don't know. Here's the thing: nobody can sell me anything, so I'm not worried about like.
Did he work for Bed Bath and Beyond?
No. He's just a random guy. I was looking at like kitchen utensils or something.
I see you like blenders. Do you like business too?
Sure, yeah. So basically, he says, "That's really funny, Emma." Everyone should read what Emma said in the chat. So at any rate, I don't know. So we end up getting coffee, and he's like, "Hey, well, we're doing this thing. It's a mentorship network or whatever. My mentor is like this and whatever." And he gave me this Guy Kawasaki book to read that was actually awesome. And so basically in the book, there was one major takeaway that I got out of this whole experience. I was like, this is a brilliant idea. So the idea in the book, I could probably find it. It's like the business model of the future, the business structure of the future or something. It's just a book about MLMs, but they didn't call it that. So network marketing, I think is what they called it. And so in the book, they talk about this idea of replicability, which is that you can think like normal people give a man a fish, good companies teach a man to fish, great companies teach a man to fish, and also to progressively continue teaching people to fish, right? Because then you can scale. That's an awesome idea, and it's an awesome idea that I found in a terrible spot, right? Like we ended up, I don't know. So we ended up like, I went to one of their house parties, and it was interesting. The people are very like, the vibe was just cagey, where it's like, these are obviously like, I'm not going to get murdered, but these people are just like trying very hard, and it's so awkward, right? Anyway, so my buddy ended up, he got his jaw broken and he ended up in the hospital. So I told the guy, I was like, "Hey, I haven't had the chance to do X, Y, and Z because my buddy's in the hospital." He's like, "I think you're not committed to this. I'm going to need the book back." I was like, "Okay, cool. You did me a favor," because I was going to jump as soon as you guys try to get me to sell stuff. But so anyway, that was my brief stint in an MLM for research purposes, obviously. But this is the thing where it's interesting. Something about that is a good idea. The problem is people have a really hard time separating like pieces out of things. So you think MLMs are bad? Yes, they are. Another quote that Ocean like, effective MLMs have effective components though, and if you're smart, you can take those things out and leave the rest of the bullshit. Like, hey, maybe don't sell things to your friends and family, right? A good rule of thumb for all sales, by the way, is if this is not how you would interact with your grandma, you're probably doing something wrong. Right? You're not going to sell your grandma shit that she doesn't need because you want to make money. You're not going to make bad decisions on behalf of your grandma, right? That's always a good frame of reference. Is if you wouldn't do it to your grandma, you probably shouldn't do it to a potential customer, right? But that replicability idea stuck with me all these years, and I thought about that for a long time. And I've written about it, but not in like a business context, in some other weird contexts. So I won't share that. But what you're trying to do in a perfect company. Let's imagine anybody, I don't know, somebody, I want to pick somebody else. I'm trying to pick different people. Who has more than one person in their company that they're in charge of in this chat. Yes, agreed, Samantha.
Scans chat.
Does anyone have at least one freelancer that works for them?
I mean, I got freelancers that work for me. But...
No, but I already did you, Sam.
Okay.
I got freelancers.
Jay. Yeah, okay, Jay's there. Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's pretend that we're talking about Jay's company. So he may or may not ever do this. This is just for the sake of argument. But Jay helps people integrate crypto services into their business. Okay, he's got freelancers that help him do this. If Jay's going to scale beyond the scope of, maybe max Jay could manage 10, 15 people effectively, that's a lot. That's a lot of people to handle yourself. Like, I think 8 is a good number, but let's say Jay's trying to get beyond 15 or something, right? Well, he's going to have to bring somebody on that can do management or basically break himself into multiple jobs. So one of the differences between somebody who's like a C-suite level or an executive level skill set, meaning somebody who's an entrepreneur or a founder or a C-suite manager, high management in a larger company, right? Typically, they're not just good at one thing, right? There's a ranking system, like a mental way that I like to think about this. My buddy a long time ago gave me this tidbit, and I kind of expanded on it. But he said there are 3 kinds of people. You have pennies, dimes, and quarters. Pennies are only good if you have a ton of them, and it's really, really difficult to do stuff, right? If you have a lot of, if you got 100 pennies, you got $1, but you have to carry around 100 pennies, and it's like a giant lump, right? It's really inconvenient. So you can get big groups of people to do stuff, but it's a pain in the ass, basically, right? If they're not specialists or something. Dimes are pretty cool. You only need 10 dimes to make $1, right? And dimes have more utility, and they're actually very small. They're easy to manage. And quarters, everybody, you might ignore other coins on the street, but everyone will pick up a quarter, right? Quarters are really good. They're very easy to deal with. They are the only coin in the modern world that's actually still worth anything. Pennies certainly aren't. They're actually worth less than the copper that it takes to make them with, copper and zinc. But so no, the nickels are bad. But for the sake of argument, let's just pretend there are 3. So my buddy told me this a long time ago, and I was like, oh, that's a pretty good idea. So I tried to flesh that out in more of a business context, because that was more of like, how do you determine what people you should keep in your social group if you have a bunch to pick from? And so I turned that into basically like a letter grade system. So you can imagine like school grading from F to A, right? You really should not ever work. F people are actively bad. D people are just not good at anything. C people can do one job if you supervise them. B people can do one job without supervision. A people can do multiple jobs, mostly unsupervised. And S people can make it. So S is also in Japan, S is higher than A. And I think it just sounds cooler. So S people are executive level. They can make serious business decisions and manage them and own them without input. So if you have, let's say the difference between a programmer, like a development manager or project manager, a head of development, and the CTO, right? Let's imagine that's FABC, right? So a single developer, maybe, they could probably do their job really well, but they're not going to just make product decisions themselves. They're just going to say, okay, maybe I could make a decision about how to solve this problem, but the problem was given to me by the B person, right? The B person, okay, cool. They can own this thing. They're in their sandbox. They've got their job to do, right? The A person can maybe manage decision makers, or they can manage a larger team than that. And the S person is somebody that if they really, really wanted to, they could probably go start their own thing, or at least they could run their whole department without any input from anyone else, right? They know it in and out, and they're an expert level kind of thing. Well, so on the spectrum of people, you can imagine, like, let's say McDonald's, right? Very, very large companies work because they're able to recruit and manage people with very low skill levels. It depends on the company. Obviously, McDonald's, I think, is probably the benchmark for like the lowest skill job in most people's minds. So the way that they've gotten the job of being a fry cook or a cashier or something automated, where it's like you literally do these exact tasks, this exact way, the same every time. And the total number of things that you have to do is very small, right? So you could have at McDonald's, you could have a D person and they could do that. And this is why when you go to McDonald's, the ice cream machine is always broken, because that's the price that you pay when you work with people that are very low skill, right? You can imagine that your maybe shift lead or someone is a C here, right? They can manage the Ds. They can kind of like, they're not totally bad at everything. They are pretty competent within their domain. But if you ask them to like do the finances for McDonald's, they'd be screwed, right? They'd be like not capable of doing that at all. You can imagine your B person here is maybe the store manager, right? This person can manage multiple different kinds of tasks within the domain. They probably know all of the jobs in the store. They can make some decisions, but they're ultimately getting their management direction from the A person, who would be like your regional manager, right? So this person probably manages 20 or 30 McDonald's, or maybe it's 10. I don't know how many they do, but let's pretend it's 10, right? This person not only knows all the problems going on with one store, they know the problems between stores, so like supply chain stuff, delivery schedules, pay schedules, probably a lot of the finances. They know what the cash, revenue ratios and stuff are. I know there's a term for that. I'm not like a numbers person. And then your S person would be like an executive. So the executive is like, hey, we're going to try rolling out this new product that my department's been developing. We have a double McChicken or whatever the fuck they do. I don't know. You have, people who are like, hey, we've got a new marketing strategy. We're going to roll this out in the Southwest region and test it and see what the feedback is. Because we drove by a Dairy Queen last week, and they had like this very Texas themed Dairy Queen. Is very weird, and they clearly had like advertising on the building that was created by the franchise owner, not by the company, because it was really bad and confusing. So you can see where that could go wrong too if you have the wrong person at the wrong level, right? And so, in a perfect world, if you're running management properly, maybe depends on the person. Some people have a finite capacity for skills, barring the world's greatest training. But I think there are, everyone is made to do certain things. There's a scope of what people can do. If you have somebody who could be a really good physicist, maybe they could be good at McDonald's too, but they would probably hate their life, right? If there's somebody who doesn't really care what they do for work and they just want to make money, and they want something consistent that pays on time, they're probably gonna have a better time there if they can't go do theoretical physics or like a startup or whatever, right? But there is some degree of advancement that people can do relative to the person. So like you can imagine your A people maybe could get recruited for the S roles if they like learn more and more things and they're really robust, right? Maybe your B people can become A's. Maybe your C people can become B's. I don't really normally talk about D's or F's because it's insulting to those people, and also you don't really want to work with them. But if you're doing your job right and you're, at whatever level you're at, your job is not just to have people do the tasks that they're doing. Your job is to teach people to do the task so well that you don't need to watch them doing it. And that makes them move up, and it allows you to move up to more complicated things. So let's say I'm building out a sales team. If I have to, let's say I have 5 salespeople, right? If I have 5 salespeople and I need to watch all of them every time and get, sit in on all their calls and give them feedback, then I don't really have 5 salespeople. I have 5 people that are, talking while I'm thinking for them, right? They're not really doing their job by themselves. If I train my salespeople really well, maybe I have a really good script, maybe I have a good training program, maybe I work with them really for a long time. Cool, maybe I never need to touch them again, and they're the best, right? Maybe they can make decisions, they can figure out what kind of leads they want to chase down. All right, a person that gets to that level could probably run the whole sales team at that point. However, there's one more rule that I'm going to throw out here. This is kind of, there's 2 angles to this rule. So there's the Peter principle, which is that people get promoted to the level of their greatest incompetence. The best example of this is Michael Scott from The Office, right? So Michael Scott in The Office was the best salesperson for Dunder Mifflin. He is in fact the worst manager, right? He gets promoted to manager because he's the best salesperson, but they actually promoted him to a level that he cannot operate at. So maybe he was a B, right? He's the best. He's perfect at sales and he can handle that completely. He's not an A and they put him in an A job, right? And your S here would be like David Wallace, right? Or Jan, although Jan's insane. But like David Wallace would be an S. He's an executive level person. So, or like Robert California or the Southern lady who came in later in the show would be S's. So when you promote someone to a job that they're not good at, they stop getting promoted. And that's very unfortunate because they end up getting stuck at a job that they can't do. So the way that we treat promotion, the way that we think about things is that, oh, getting promoted is good. Having, a management job is better than having a task oriented or whatever job, labor related job. And because we have these two things that are incorrect, we end up setting ourselves up for failure. And as companies scale, they continue to promote more and more incompetent people in the management or higher roles, when in fact they would have been better if they just stayed where they were at. And that eventually destroys the company, right? The inverse of this rule is called Dilbert's or Dogbert's law, but I always say Dilbert's law because nobody knows who Dogbert is, but it's from Scott Adams, the cartoonist from the Dilbert comic, right? The Dogbert's law is that management will actually promote people to management to make the worst people to management to make them less effective, and that's a little bit more cynical than I am, but I'm also not an engineer or in engineering, so maybe that's different in engineering, but so there are some ways around this too, right? One of the things that I've thought about that I usually suggest to people is like, any promotion should be a temporary thing until you can assess whether or not that they're good at it and happy with it. However, if you wanted to promote someone in the first place, either way, they should get a raise and they should not lose the raise even if they get promoted, right? So let's say Sam and I work at a tech company, and Sam is my lead developer, and I promote him to the project manager, right? Sam might be the best dev in the company.
Woohoo!
Sam might be the worst manager in the company, right? However, if you're doing this correctly, you would promote Sam temporarily, let's say 6 months, a year, whatever, and we'd assess and we'd have clear benchmarks for success. We'd also probably interview the team that's under him and say, hey, do you think this is an improvement? Is he on top of his shit? Are you having a good time? Is work getting done well? And if he doesn't pan out, then we would put Sam back where he was, and we would let Sam keep whatever raise that he got, and we'd give him actually a pathway for continuous raises over time, so that he's able to continue to advance his career without necessarily changing roles, which may not be a good fit. I would say naturally you tend to have like two groups of people, one of whom is better at management and one of whom is better at task related things. People who are at the highest level, like S or A level people, are probably good at both. It'd be really weird if you have someone managing a software project that doesn't know how to code. But on the other hand, Steve Jobs didn't really know how to code, and that really wasn't that big of a problem. And he was at the top level, right? Technically, he probably did know how to code a bit, but not as good as Woz, and certainly not as good as most of the other people in the company who code, right? So it's important to know enough to manage your team. If you walk into manage a software project and you don't know what like JavaScript is, you're probably not going to be able to effectively manage them.
I mean, this is what Triba does with our moderator team. We got a trial staff role. We need to be better at this and establishing clear benchmarks. But yeah, we keep them on for a month to test out, is this good? Is this going to work? It's not exactly the same thing, but just in application, I think this is good advice.
Yeah, it just requires you to change the way that you think about stuff, because people really do, like, people are so dead set on the idea that getting a new position is always good, and they're more concerned with the status rather than like, how much do I like my job? How good am I at the thing that I'm doing?
Right. Or can I do it? Or am I ruling out them getting somebody to fill that role who can do it way better?
Yeah, and it's like, we need to decouple this notion of status away from, there are other ways to give people status. So maybe if you had this separate concept, you could give people, I mean, if you really, I personally don't care about job titles, but I know a lot of people do. So you could give people increasing job titles. So like at Tesla, they had 5 levels for every single job, right? And if you were a production associate, which was the intro level, you could be level 5 at that. But if you were level 5 at that, it means you've been there for 10 years and you actually got paid probably better than like, you probably got paid like $30, $40 an hour, right? Which that job starts at like 18. So you're getting paid a stupid amount of money relative to the average person who's doing your job because you have the experience. And so I think that's a good start in the sense that it allows you to have a career path that isn't just, but if, once you get to that level 5, then you're done. And I think that's not really ideal. So like, I would probably have, maybe like a general framework for continuing advancement that is just infinite and it's kind of procedural. And maybe you do it in like maybe it just, the length of time or something, you increase it by like 20% every time. So it moves a little bit slower. So you don't end up paying like an entry level employee that's been there for 20 years, like $100,000 a year or something. But also if they've been there for 20 years, maybe you should, right? There's probably a way to do that. I've not ever been in a position to make those decisions, but I've thought about it a bit. So I guess the takeaway from that last little bit is, to bring that back, there are different levels that you can have people at. These are conceptual levels, they're not real, but you can loosely understand like, okay, maybe I consider myself to be a B in the sense that like I'm a specialist who's really good at this one thing, right? Okay, if you know you're that, you probably don't want to be the person who's doing entrepreneurship and starting your own project, right? Hey, I really like to code. I really don't like managing people. Really don't like sales. You probably shouldn't be a founder. That's a lot more managing people and sales than it is coding a lot of the time, right? Except at the beginning, and eventually somebody else is going to do that, right? If you really like doing sales and managing people and you don't really like coding, maybe you shouldn't stay in a coding job, right? So knowing this about yourself is obviously the beginning of how you would learn about this. And like, honestly, representing yourself, like I think everyone here, there's no reason that you shouldn't be at least a B person, right? And this is the thing too, B, A, and S are not necessarily better or worse, right? You could be the best coder in the world and be a B because you don't want to manage people or you don't have social skills or something like that. So there's everything under B, I would say, gets progressive. Like those ones are not great because it means you're not at a level where you're master of some domain. And if you're at a level, like if you honestly reflect and you don't think you're there, get to B and then decide if you want to be a specialist or a generalist, right? Because that would be the difference. In some cases, maybe your CTO is actually just this super specialist coder person that really is hands-on with all your projects and stuff. Because I know a lot of CTOs are like that, right? Do you want that person to be the CEO? Maybe not, because then they have to learn a whole bunch of new skills. But if you're just leading all of the development at a 500 person company, that might be still good, although you're probably not spending as much time coding as you would if you were at that B level, right? But again, I typically I use this more as like a concept to illustrate stuff than it. I wouldn't necessarily tell the people I'm working with this or where I think they are in this system, because the nature of people is that everyone's going to assume that different levels in the hierarchy are better or worse. They're just different, right? B, A, and S are not necessarily better or worse than each other, whereas anything below a B is bad. So you have it's a binary system of like B, A, and S are good, C and below is bad. So 0 and 1, right? Mm. But so yeah, so I guess the takeaway from that is if you're going to move forward, at some point, if you're hiring, you're going to have to learn how to make the people that are under you at least as good as you are in whatever task. So if you're a founder and you do coding and you do sales and you do marketing and you do pitching and also like financial management, those are probably 5 different people. You're not going to hire one other person who's exactly like you to do all that stuff. It's just not how it works. They're probably doing their own thing. But you could hire a coder, a salesperson, a manager, a finance person, and whatever the other thing I said was, right? And those may all be B's or A's. And maybe you have like an ops person that's really good and they can do, management and sales, or they can do coding and management, right? And that might be an A, but that's because they're more of a generalist. So you have trade-offs too with generalists and specialists. Like specialists are absolutely going to know things way better than the generalists will. Like a generalist coder that also does, if I coded, I would use myself as an example, but I don't code at all and I don't understand how it works. But a better example, I do design, I do Webflow, I do pitch decks, I do business philosophy, right? So there are better designers than me. There are certainly better Webflow designers than me. I'm not, I would say that I'm I'm at best a B in Webflow. I'm not like an A level, and I know someone who is, right. So I don't like doing websites very much. It's a giant pain in the ass. So I'm trying to automate, or I'm trying to offload that to someone I know who's like an A level Webflow designer, meaning they're at the mastery level. They know how all the things work. They can do creative solutions to problems. It doesn't take them an enormous amount of time to do stuff like it does for me. Um, and it's because I can be honest with myself about that. Like, hey, actually, yeah, no, I'm good at this. I'm not great at this, and I'm not ever going to have the motivation or the drive to be a specialist in this one thing. It's not going to happen. I can tell you that right now, right? So the ultimate takeaway, honest self-reflection is going to be the bedrock of all success. If you can't be honest with yourself, I promise you, no one around you is going to be more honest with you than you are capable of being with you. But people really like to lie to themselves or be deluded in other ways. So you should get good at that. Once you've gotten good at that, make an honest assessment of the people that you're working with, right? Or if you're not in a management position, you don't have to do this at all. You could just use this as a mental framework for yourself. But if you are working with groups of people and you are trying to automate skills out of yourself, you need to think about replicability. You're not just trying to teach someone to do something, you're trying to teach someone to be able to do that thing as well as you and to be able to teach other people to do it in the future, which is a very high level of competence. It's very difficult. Um, if you're going to get people to that level, whether that's in your company's values or it's a process or it's something else, it needs to be systematized. It needs to be turned into a series of like comprehensible, actionable steps that they can use manually until they learn them fluently and until they can riff on them and solve problems in a creative way, right? So we talked about a lot of stuff there, but food for thought.
Yeah.
That'll be what we leave it on. So
I think that was really, really helpful. I don't know about you guys, but I got quite a bit out of that. I think I've been really considering, who to hire for my team for White Rabbit as a sales team, and so this was extremely beneficial. Just thinking about, what roles, what tasks do I need to find the highest qualified people for? What tasks can, I just train someone to do based on their competence if they're able to pick it up. There's a fair amount of training that goes into hiring and a fair amount of investment. So I've noticed a lot of people are going in house because they can't waste the energy to train somebody to do a unique role as a contractor that they're going to leave in a month or two. It's like, why would they do that for 3 months? They want to keep people on, but that's kind of a sidetrack. I got some good clips. You guys got any questions? See, a lot of people joined while we were doing this. Thanks for
Yeah, hey,
coming
how's
out.
it going? Garrett, thanks for that. Great session. So I joined a little bit later. What was that framework called you were referring to with the different personality types?
this is just something that I kind of made up. So I'll loosely explain the beginning of that again. So basically, you have a series of letter grades. I include the letter S as a way to explain going above and beyond. So I people who are at an F level are not functional. These are people that would like call out from work because they're drunk or something like that. So we're just going to ignore them. People who are at a D level are doing like you can imagine are only capable of doing like an entry level job at a fast food or some other like a Walmart greeter or something. Maybe it's old people, maybe it's like very young people who have no other skills. Maybe it's people that have, for whatever reason don't have the ability to get better at stuff. So again, we're going to throw them out. You probably shouldn't be working with those people. C level people are people that can do really basic stuff, but require a lot of supervision. If you're in a company that's smaller than 100 people, you probably don't need to think about them because if you're hiring someone that's at a C level, maybe that's an intern or something that could be better in the future, but you're trying to do a whole lot of education for them to get there somewhere else. So let's throw them out too. C's are important. D's are important if you're a really giant company and you really want, like, you have something that's super standardized, super brain dead to accomplish. It could be like pulling a lever in a factory or like making a cheeseburger at McDonald's where it's the same exact thing every single time all day. But for the sake of anyone who's working in a startup, you're not dealing with these people or shouldn't be, right? So that leaves us with B, A, and S. S being the level above 100%, right? B level people are specialists. A level people are, I would say, generalists, and S level people are executives, where they're far above the standard performance level of a normal person. Theoretically, maybe the S's are also specialists in some specific field, but they have the ability to do the variety of tasks that go along with an executive level role versus, like, say, a managerial role. So like an A may be able to manage a department. They might be good at the thing in the department, but they're probably not the best at the thing. Otherwise, they should be a B, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is kind of a loose framework. I use this as a way to think about stuff. I would not use this more than casually. I wouldn't go super hardcore on it because I think it's just a good reference point of, like, and you honestly, it could be simplified into the notion of you have basically specialists, managers, and executives might be, you lose a little bit with that in the context of it, but specialists, managers, executives, where the managers can do a variety of skills, the specialists can do one thing perfectly, and the executives are, at a high level of competence in multiple skills, can make, business decisions without guidance that are actually good. Whereas the A's maybe can make decisions inside of their zone of competence, which could be their department, but they're probably, relying on the S for direction or whatever. And the B's are just like, hey, we need to build an app. They could just go build the app and make good decisions about it. But if you're like, hey, we need to, talk about the utility of this app in the market as it changes, and maybe we have to make this decision because of this demographic, they're probably not going to be doing that because that's like a high concept generalist thing, right?
I would also
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks for that recap.
I would also add, like, a lot of people need to avoid having self-limiting beliefs in terms of their own capabilities or their future. I think oftentimes people kind of shun themselves from strategic narratives or things like that. So I just point that out.
Yeah, I'd be interested in riffing on that a little bit. So I'll play this out with myself. So if we look at the scope of things that I do, right? And I'll say that includes, so my agency skills, the things that my agency performs as a service, right? Which is business philosophy, branding, pitch decks and websites, or pitch and sales decks and websites, right? There's no universe. I know the amount of work I have, conscious incompetence with the amount of work required to become the best at websites. I just don't care to do it. It's not meaningful for me. It's never going to happen, right? Branding, I am not the world's best designer. There are people who have better natural design talent than me. I'm a damn good designer, but I'm not the best. And the likelihood of me being the best in, like, graphic design, again, doesn't necessarily do it for me. I would like to be great, right? I'd like to be considered to be a great designer, but I don't. The amount of work to go, like, to 80-20 it, like, to do that extra 20% to be the best, is just not appealing. Although I think over time I'll continue to get better at it, right? Sales decks and pitch decks, I really like them. I think that is more of a generalist skill because it's not just the design of the deck. Obviously, that's something that I think most sales and pitch decks are very poorly designed. So I have a huge leg up there. However, that the skill of pitching as a concept is very robust, right? So it requires understanding psychology, sales skills, understanding the market, understanding finances, which I'm the weakest at currently. That is the one piece of the deck that I usually lean on the client more and, like, say, hey, this is how we can say this to make it more appealing, but you guys have got to run the numbers. I'm not going to run numbers for you, right? I'm not a numbers guy at all. So I think I would like to be amazing at pitching. And even if it's not just pitch decks, if it's the notion of, storytelling in a way that the story leads to action, which is what basically what pitching is, right? So that's somewhere where I'd like to continue to be, like, aim for at least being, like, top 5% over time. Business philosophy, there's no universe where there's more than maybe 1,000 people in the world that do it. I've met one guy who I've been talking to the last couple of weeks who does philosophy consulting for business people, which is still slightly different from what I do, which is more about the business's philosophy rather than the personal philosophy and how that benefits an entrepreneur, right? So I know there's a guy that worked at Skype that was a philosopher that they hired to do philosophy for them, who's I think I still have the tab pulled up with him in it, so I can tell you what his name is. Now I closed it out. Damn. I'll try and find that for everybody at some point. But that's something that I think, yes, I could be the best at that. I think it is a very small field. People don't see it as valuable. I think I am absolutely competitive in that field, and that is something that I would be interested in doing forever. Right? I can keep getting better at that. It's playing on my strengths, all that kind of stuff. So you can see where it's like, okay, if I just decided to do it arbitrarily, could I be the world's best website person? Maybe, but it would be infinite effort because I don't enjoy it like a great deal. I really don't. It costs energy for me to do that, right? So this is kind of where I'm getting at. Whereas, like, on the one hand, yes, you should at least start out with the assumption that you could do whatever you want, and if you put your mind to it, you could be successful. There's a phase of your life where you should have that as part of your like repertoire, right? But I think if we're being honest with ourselves, and the more that you kind of get out in the work world and you realize, oh, you know what? I really don't like sales. I really don't like talking to 100 people a day and trying to convince them to buy something, right? I know a lot of people that do like that, and they're really good at it, right? For me, that costs me energy to do. It's draining. Pitching is different, right? I'd say regular sales is a lot more about, like, there's like kind of a structure to it, and you have to like counter objections. I don't like doing that. I want to be able to say things in such a way that you don't even have any objections by the time we get done. I've just told you a story that's so compelling that you're just going to want to be involved in any capacity, and you're going to ask me for the opportunity to be involved, right? I can't say I necessarily could do that now, but that's where I'm trying to aim with the pitching. And philosophy, I have to invent a whole field, like, and standardize it and communicate the value of it, and that's a whole completely different, abstract, unformed task that I've set for myself, which is very different. So yes, you should start with the premise that you can do whatever you want, and you should take a nice long look at yourself, and this will take a very long time to do. And the better you do this, the easier your life, or at least the more meaningful your life will be. It won't necessarily make it easier, but the likelihood of you doing shit that you hate continues to decrease the more you do this. And if you're like, hey, I could be anything I want, and I've decided that I want to be a stage magician, but I actually don't like, I have stage fright, and I don't like the act of being on stage at all. It's like, well, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, right? You're doing something because you've chosen to do it, not because it's like playing to your strengths. So I think you got to balance those things. Like, I am not someone that would argue for being like a hard realist and say, oh, well, you're never going to be able to work at NASA or something. Like, you shouldn't talk to people like that. I'd much rather someone go and try to work at NASA and fail than to never try, right? Because at least when you fail, you learn something. Winning doesn't teach you anything. Winning teaches you that whatever you did worked, but losing will teach you all the things you did that didn't work. And it's go get as many losses under your belt as you can, because you're going to know a hell of a lot more about what doesn't work than the people that never lost, right? And on a long enough timeline, everyone's going to lose more than they win, at least at first. So yeah, I think that would be the way I would sum that up is, you can do whatever you want. The things that you're going to enjoy doing is a much smaller group of things. The better you can figure out what that group of things is, and when you find the right things, the things that are in that group are things that will give you energy to do them. And they may suck. Like, I've been like working like 13-hour days for the entire month of January, and it sucks doing that, but it's like motivational to do it. Although doing websites for 13 hours really is not fun, and that makes me very tired, right? That doesn't feed my soul. So go find those things that are really inspiring, that give you energy to do, or at least you're motivated to push through the discomfort of them because you feel like it's meaningful, it's moving you in the direction of something you care about. And then you won't have to think, oh, I'm not good at anything, or I could do whatever I want. Reality is there's a scope of things that you are better equipped than anyone else in the world to do and enjoy. And if you find those things, the highest likelihood of like real meaningful success, and that doesn't mean fame, it doesn't mean fortune, but success in a way that matters to you, that's where it's going to come out of. It's not going to come out of, if your parents say, hey, go be a doctor, and then you're a doctor and you fucking hate being a doctor, right? Like, I don't want that person. Yeah, well, that's why I use that example. But there are many doctors out there right now who did not want to be doctors and probably shouldn't be
Like,
doctors, even though
could
they
have
can
been
do
me.
the job.
Could have been me. And
There
then
you
I
go.
met Garrett. No, it started before that, but definitely do what you enjoy and you'll never work a day in your life. I mean, I'm sure y'all have heard that, but it's true. It's true. Don't get forced into something just based on what other people are telling you are your strengths. Take some personality tests. Test it, talk to people like Garrett and, John Fitch, who are able to perceive that kind of creativity and talent and direct you. So I've gotten a lot of great advice from Garrett.
I'm glad.
I appreciate you, man.
So curious here. So how would you balance the question of doing what you enjoy, but at the same time doing something you're good at? Just an example here. So I work in tech sales. When I started, I didn't necessarily enjoy it. I didn't even plan on this career path, but with just putting in hours and work, I became pretty damn good at it, and now I enjoy it because I've kind of reaped those rewards and got the momentum going.
Hmm.
I would ask why you stuck with it.
Yeah, just like any other job at first, you just need to get some income going. And then as you're exploring different career paths, it's like, hey, you narrow it down to at least that's my approach. You start with a bunch of different paths you can take, and you narrow it down to well, first off, what's going to be bringing in the income, but then what can I perform at a high level? So, no, I didn't necessarily go with the approach of finding something that I enjoyed off the bat, but I ended up enjoying it after putting in the time there.
Yeah, I'm going to share something in the chat here. This is I did not come up with this exercise, although I use it in kind of a different way than the solo version of this works. So this is a concept called ikigai, which is a Japanese framework for how you figure out what your purpose is. And I would say this is something to point the average person in the right direction. Actually, I have a funny story for this one that I'll tell instead of what I was about to say. So, um, okay, so a long time ago at a different company that I worked at, I did a seminar where I presented this exercise to a group of a cohort of Founders Institute founders, right? So the Founders Institute is kind of like an accelerator program. You go in, they train you on how to market and build your startup better. And so they had just either finished or were very close to finishing when we did this, right? And so I basically just talked through this whole exercise with the group. I told them, hey, write this stuff down, and we're going to go through it when we get done. So this exercise basically has, it's a Venn diagram with 4 circles. There are what you're good at, what you get paid for, what the world needs, and what you love to do. And so you can, if you see, I posted this in the co-working chat channel,
Yeah, I pulled it up.
where these things intersect create different kind of things. So what you're good at and what you love is your passion. But if you don't get paid for it and the world doesn't need it, okay, that's cool. I'm passionate about playing piano. I'm not good enough at it, and I don't think the world needs an abundance of more like mediocre piano players, right? That's a passion of mine. I definitely don't get paid to do it. So you can, and I won't go through all of them, but you can see where, similarly, if you get paid for something and you're good at it, that's your profession. But if you don't love it, it's not going to totally fulfill you. Although it's better to be good at something you get paid for than love it and be good at it and not get paid for it. But in a perfect world, everybody somewhere, maybe you would do this every couple of years in your career, or maybe when you're preparing to make a career transition, you would go through and kind of think through this process and say, okay, well, maybe I'm good at managing people. I've been paid for managing people. I think the world needs good leadership, and I love inspiring a team. It's like, okay, yeah, actually, you might have been in lower level management, but actually what you want to do is like build a team or work with teams to inspire them or something like that, right? And so everything's a series of trade-offs. I would say earlier in your career, you have more opportunity in the sense that you could go in more directions, and the barrier to entry is lower in the sense that I could go get an entry level job at a variety of places, or I could probably still if I'm 18, I could go to college somewhere or doing something, or I can get an internship or go to trade school or whatever, right? And so for me personally, I went to school 2 years late. Before I did that, I had 2 sales jobs. I got really into sales, and then I decided I was never going to do sales again because it's not the way that I operate. I went to school for marketing. I did not like school. I was unimpressed with the marketing curriculum. So I was there for 3 semesters and I dropped out to start a business, right? Um, in the first business, it was a valet trash company for multifamily housing, which is just the people who take your trash out at apartments. That was mostly out of desperation because my buddy was starting it. I was like, yeah, I'm down. Let's do this. I have nothing else. I have no other idea what I'm going to do with myself. And we did that for a year. And then at the end of the year, we were like, yeah, neither of us are particularly passionate about trash. And this is an industry full of like 70-year-old people who've been running this business model for their whole lives. So maybe we could beat them. I think our version was better, but the the mental and physical and emotional labor of trying to beat them at that is insurmountable, right? It's just not. I'm not going to wake up thrilled about it. So after that, we moved out west. I started working in a microchip factory for a little while. I ended up working at a Tesla factory in Reno. While I was there, I started writing, right? I wrote over the course of the next 2 years, I wrote like 160 articles. I got 2 books out of it. I started a small media company that I could run while I was at Tesla because my job, I mostly like automated out and my job was very dull. It was very easy. So while I was there, I was just on Twitter 24/7 trying to run this company and like, post and market stuff. Right. And at this point, I'm moving in a direct, like for the first several years of all that stuff, I really didn't know what I was going to do because I love philosophy, but I don't know if you've ever heard what people do with philosophy degrees, but it's not make money. I don't have one either, but I chose not to get one because I knew that the career prospects were philosophy professor or be at Starbucks. Right. So I'm trying things out, right? I worked as CMO for a startup that did vape delivery before GoPuff kind of pivoted. So it was like an open market at the time. And then North Carolina changed the regulations around the ability to deliver vapes, and we were annihilated. And GoPuff pivoted into being more like snacks and shit. So we got crushed. I moved back out and ended up doing a variety of things. And then I ended up working at a design firm in town. And I'd been designing for a long time, but I never saw it as like a marketable skill. But I realized actually I'm pretty good at this. And this is something I enjoy doing, and I enjoy managing teams and building teams. Vic, who just jumped in,
What up, Vic?
was around for a lot of this stuff. I met Vic through Twitter, actually. He worked at the first that media startup. And so at this point, it's like, okay, I kind of have a direction. I kind of know I'm doing something related to what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And I learned how to make websites at some point in this, and started my own agency. And by the time I got there, it's like, okay, I actually do know what I'm supposed to be doing for the most part. Like I have other things I want to do in the future, but with the agency, I'm establishing business philosophy as a concrete discipline. If I do that, I'm working on something that's very meaningful to me. I think the world needs it. I have, in fact, been paid for this. And I consider myself to be quite good at this thing that I made up. Right. So, so I know that was a lot, but hopefully that kind of illustrates how you would make these decisions, because if you don't have some kind of like emotional desire to do the thing that you're doing, like obviously you wanted to get better at sales. And I will tell you, a lot of people don't have the capacity to do that, even if they wanted to. Like if you picked, I'm sure, let's say you pick me and you at age 23 or something, whatever you started, right? There's no way I would beat you at sales in the long run. There's no way. Even if I just did sales, I don't like doing it. I don't like those kind of interactions. Like it's not natural for me. The way that I've managed to do sales for my agency is very ass backwards, and it doesn't work the way you would do it if you're like actively being a salesperson. So there's innate kind of predispositions towards why that we just have, and it's our job to identify those things, because when you find these out, you're just moving in the direction of doing stuff that you like. And so yeah, I would say that's probably a good summary. I want to get your feedback. Did that answer your question or provide context?
Yeah, no, 100%. And I do like that Ikigai circle. Definitely brings some clarity there. I just think at the end of the day, one thing that could almost be like a pitfall is following something that really brings you joy and putting, I mean, too much weight into any given aspect of the circle. Um, because I think, and from personal experience, it's not a completely static concept. Something like love for the process could come with time. At first, you may not have love because you don't fully understand it, but then 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years into it, that that part of the ikigai circle here has expanded, and boom, it's, it's now something you enjoy doing. You're making money. It's something you're very competent at, and the world needs it.
I agree with that. So where I guess the way that I would explain that then is that um, most people would look at this chart and say, "Oh, well, I want to do what I love," and it's like, well, really, if we're talking about your profession, the first, the two that are the most important are what you're good at and what you get paid for, right? If you're not good at it, you shouldn't be doing it. Unless it's something you can get better at. But if you're getting paid for and they're training you, or you have the ability to get better at it, that's cool. But if somebody, nobody's going to pay me to be a coder um, because I don't know how to code, right? So that's a little bit different. If I want to go and like learn this thing myself and then get myself to a position, if I went to like Lambda school, that'd be
Uh-huh.
different. But so I would consider these things to be equally weighted against each other. And it's like, okay, you don't, for the vast majority, for example, in the story that I told, um, when I started, the first place I did sales at was a movie store in my hometown because I love movies. And I realized when I was there, they had the sales program that I got very good at. As you know, I had a wonderful manager and she taught me a lot of stuff, and I busted ass to do it. I would be like hardcore. Um, I didn't like the sales part of it at all, but I wanted to be good at that. And so I got better at it and learned to like it so much that the next job that I took was a pure commission based sales job.
Mm.
And then I realized over time that the love circle of that got smaller as I got better at it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do something else. So I agree with that. And I think especially early in your career, you maybe get to pick one circle, and it's what are you going to get paid for? And you hopefully you get good at it. Maybe you learn to love it or not. But I guess where I would look at this is like, okay, if you're choosing to make transitions, whereas I've had probably like 25 or 30 jobs in my life, right? Um, I would not recommend that strategy to anyone. That I would not recommend that people do anything the way that I did it, because it's all pure trial and error. I'm extremely stubborn, and also like just don't do what I did. If you do it, it's because you don't care to hear from me that it's a bad way to do things, right? Um, but ultimately, because the thing that I'm supposed to do with my life is not something that I can go about in a normal way. I can't go work for someone and have use their business philosophy method, because it doesn't exist. If I go to school for philosophy, they certainly don't teach you to do anything useful in philosophy degree programs. And you can look at the outputs of it and see what a philosophy degree people do. They're unemployed or they teach philosophy, right? I don't want to do that. So I think that would be a difference in the regard of like it really is contextual to the person. But yes, I would say that I would say don't necessarily do soul crushing work, but
Mhm.
also you should make sure your bills are paid and your responsibilities are taken care of. And then once maybe it's kind of like a Maslow's hierarchy, then you can start thinking about passion and other stuff. Um, but it also depends too, because I think that may be a like a specialist versus generalist thing. Like
Mhm.
if I could be reincarnated as a different kind of person today, I would like to be somebody that like just sculpts or just like makes woodworking or metalwork or something. Like I really like the concept of those things, but I'm so like interested in 500 things, and I don't have the ability to just pick one thing and hone in on it. And if I could be a different person, I would be that person. Even if I wanted to do that now, I would just not be able to pay my bills, because I'd have to spend my time trying to learn like, how to use 50 different types of chisel and how they work or something like that. Because I'm envious of the notion of somebody who's like oriented toward being a specialist, right?
Mhm.
But the nature of what I do and the reason why I'm good at what I do for my clients is because I am an insane generalist, and I know a little bit about everything, and I have a really robust background of experience in like corporate and startups and small businesses, all these different things, sales, marketing. Yeah, I've done a little bit of everything. And the average founder that at least that I work with, is on their first or second startup, whereas like I've been through like 8 to this point. Some of which were funded, some of which weren't. And I've worked with probably 50, at least it's several dozen, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's, I think, part of like knowing yourself is knowing that there are, you know, I I hesitate to use the word life path because it sounds like cringy, but there are definitely different like things about the way that we are that indicate routes that we could be great and routes that we maybe can't be great in. And I don't know, maybe if you had perfect willpower and you just like were the kind of person that just is single-minded, you decide I'm going to do this and be the best at it, that would be probably someone who's a specialist naturally, right? uh Maybe the things you want to do aren't clear cut. I think, like for me, whenever people ask me what I wanted to do when I grew up as a kid, it was like, how am I supposed to pick? And I realized, like, as I fought to not pick, I fought to try and keep working all these things that I like, and that also was a correct answer for me. If I had just picked something, I probably would have been miserable because I'd be like Sylvia Plath with the pears or plums, where she's like sitting there looking at all the nice plums or pears, whatever fruit on the tree, and she just spends the whole time trying to decide which one to eat, and they all fall off and die, and then she, like, in real life, she killed herself because it's just a miserable uh, life that she lived. But it's basically about that, right? Is um, for the average person, figure out if you're a specialist or a generalist. I tend to think people are one or the other. Um, that really is going to be a broad distinction of like what direction's better for you. If you're a generalist, though, I will say the culture that we're in often tries to get people to act like we're all specialists, and there is a route for people who are generalists to be useful in that capacity. But it's very much like a loosely defined trail through the woods instead of a clear path for success. Like if you're, you know, a doctor, right? Yeah, there's tons of different kinds of doctors you could be, but there's a clear path to get to any of those jobs, and it involves repetition and diligence and being excellent at a variety of things in this order, and it's kind of predefined by society because it's a clear concept, right? Whereas the only way you can get to where I am right now, not necessarily that anyone wants to get to where I am right now, maybe give me 10 years and it might be better, but would be through doing this like ass backwards, wandering through the woods until you kind of realize how the woods work, right? So again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend anyone do anything my way, but there are also people whose I think their orientation would be to doing things in a similar way that I do them. And for those people, as long as you don't quit, you're going to figure it out eventually, right? As long as you can like self-reflect and be brutally honest with yourself and learn from your mistakes, then there is a way for you too. It's just different, and neither is better or worse. Honestly, for most people, in honestly, in most cases, probably the specialist route is a better life. Um, I'm jealous again. I mentioned I'm very jealous of the ability to do that. So I have a great deal of respect that you like could pick this thing and stick it out and learn to love it and learn to master it and make it your own. Like that's, it's very cool.
No, I appreciate that, and it just very good points, and it had me thinking. I There's even this notion that society and businesses in general reward you for being more of a specialist. You take a book, Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, hundreds of years ago. He has this example of I think it's a needle or a pin factory, where essentially one employee, if I was an employee of this pin factory and I had to make a pin, I had to do every single process of making this pin. I would have to cut the metal, I would have to heat it up, I would have to sand it, drill the little hole in this needle or pin. If I'm doing every step and I'm very general in my knowledge, I would be able to make one pin a day. However, if we have a team and I only specialize in cutting the pins, and we have one guy specializing in the forge, for example, we can now dramatically increase our output and produce hundreds, thousands of pins a day just because we specialize. Because over time, I'm going to become better at cutting the pins. I'm going to refine my techniques. We're going to become better as a unit. So yes, these specialist roles are, I'd say, more relevant for businesses, just like a McDonald's. You know, you want one guy on the fry machine, one guy at the register, because they're going to become better and better over time. But then from an entrepreneurial standpoint, that's not the approach you want to be taking. When you're starting a business, damn, you got to be, you got to be able to talk to customers, be able to manage finance, be creative with marketing. So it's kind of a conflict of interest there. You know, we're being taught to be more specialist and focused, while if you want to make it on your own, you got to take a completely different approach.
Yeah, I would say I agree with that with one small caveat, which is that I think there is a route for late stage specialists. So somebody who's like, you know, been in their industry doing their one thing for a very long time. And I've seen entrepreneurs, and a good example of this actually. One of my clients right now is a company called Carwell Industries. They're, if you look them up right now, their website, we haven't started on it yet, so don't look at their website because it's their old one. It's quite bad. So there are two of them, Dylan and Alex, right? Dylan and Alex are both, Dylan's probably like early 30s and Alex is probably early 40s, right? Um, and their business is very interesting. They have an exclusive contract with a company called Motion. Motion is, if you look at motion.com, or you may know who they are, they make tons and tons of stuff. Like they manufacture, you know, a lot of things that you've definitely heard of. And they're owned by a company called General Parts Company, which everyone's definitely seen their logo, at least if you've ever been near like an auto shop or a Home Depot or something, right? So what Carwell does for Motion is all of the factories that Motion has, Carwell does lighting for them, right?
Mm.
So they'll come in and scope out these problems and um, provide a lighting solution, then hire the people to go do it. And it's just the two of them. They just like will build a team on a la carte for every single project and just start to finish, make sure it gets done. And this is because these two guys were like specialists in their field and they understood like, oh, wow, you know, I've been working in lighting, I've been working in these factory situations for a very long time. And now I know this issue better than anyone, right? So I would say too that there is a different like, and this requires you to be a specialist and really know your field for a long time. But it's also kind of like a, you know, it's a different phase of life than like who's a good entrepreneur on the front end. And I find that a lot of times these entrepreneurs, by the time they get to their, you know, hey, I've been working in this industry and I want to start a company doing this, they have a very easy time with it because they already like, oh yeah, I know how much to charge for everything and I know how to train people for this and all this stuff. You already know it. So we, and I would say maybe that's more like starting a small business that could become a large business rather than like a startup that has the intention to like raise capital and scale in a different way. Maybe those are two distinct concepts because startups, a lot of the time, it's not always, but I think when people think of startups, they typically think like this is a company that uh, the need for this company didn't exist 5 years ago. It's a novel application of technology, or it's a novel approach to doing something, or we created this new product because there's this emerging problem in the market or something like that. That's not all, obviously not all startups, and maybe not even most of them, but I think that's would be the connotation versus a small business that's like them, where they're, you know, servicing this very large company and providing a very specific service over time to them. So, so yeah, I would say if you were just going to give people good advice, the good advice is go specialize in something, and then you at least have, you know, and don't specialize in something that's going to get automated out in 10 years. Your, you know, interpersonal skills, if you go become great at customer service, great at sales, great at management, you're always going to have a job. Everyone, those be a good chief of staff, right?
Yeah.
If you're good at programming, you're always going to have a job. You know, as much as they want to automate the code and stuff out, there's still going to be people involved. They're just going to automate out bad coders. So you'd be really set up later if you decided to become a startup founder, if you really know code and you build a software platform, right? So it's tricky, and I certainly have suffered a great deal from not being super specialized in anything until I realized that over time, when I was working on these things, I actually got pretty good at design because I've been doing that for the longest, right? And it was being good at that one thing that allowed me to start leveraging the other shit that I do, like, you know, being okay at sales, knowing a lot about like storytelling, knowing a lot about philosophy. Those I was able to fold in with design as kind of a pretense for how I could access those things. So um, I wish there was a better way that we could communicate this to people. It was kind of like, if you ever played an RPG where it's like, hey, you have like 20 skill points, you can put in these different stats. Like, you don't want to put them all into one thing, although you'd be really good at that one thing and bad at everything else. You want to have one that's pretty good. Like if you're if you're somebody who's fighting with a sword, you want to be really strong, but you also don't want to be stupid. So maybe put some into intelligence, or you put some into like agility or something, right? And I think if we taught it to kids or taught it to young people as they're coming up through the system, like, you should have one thing that you know well enough to make money doing while you're building these other skills in the background. Then later in life, you're going to find a way to fold these things together. And that's where you get something you're really passionate about. Because there's other shit you can't just teach. You can't go to business school and just learn how to be a good manager. Like, you have to manage people and fuck it up and do it the hard way. And then you'll learn over time how to be good at it. But you can't just like, it's like participatory or experiential knowledge you have to attain through doing. So
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I,
that's some good stuff, and it kind of brings me to 2 points just quick. So just like you said, with those skill points and specializing in something that can't be automated, I think that's a great starting point. You take something broad enough, sales, marketing, finance, management, something that can be applied to a bunch of different industries and sectors. As long as you have that skill now in your back pocket, no one can take it away from you. You can, if I get laid off in my tech job because I don't know, computers become inferior one day. Cool. Well, I have all this sales skill. Let me go sell, I don't know, hot dogs on the street. You can apply that to somewhere else. But one
100%.
example, yeah. But what you brought up as well with the generalist statement. So the author Robert Greene, so he's the guy that wrote 48 Laws of Power, Art of Seduction, and all that stuff. He's got a really interesting story. So he wrote, I think, 48 Laws of Power when he was like 35. So for a long period of his life, he was just traveling around, having all these random jobs, construction in Greece. He was trying to become, writing these short novels here and there. And it took him years and years and years to finally get to the point where all that experience went full circle. And he could write the 48 Laws of Power because he knew all these anecdotes from these random jobs he had in Greece or his travels in, Spain and Italy. So it really didn't make sense until he got to the point where it went full circle. So, two completely different approaches that still can lead to essentially the same outcome.
Yeah, and well, that's the thing too, where it's like, for me, that is much closer to my path, where it's like, it says on his Wikipedia he's had 60 to 65 jobs before he
Yeah.
wrote the book. And I had like 30, I think, before I like actually felt like I knew what I was doing. Because I would routinely have conversations with him, like I'd call my grandma and she'd be like, "Oh, what are you doing now?" It's like, "Oh, well, grandma, I had like 2 jobs since the last time we talked," or "I'm doing this." And she's like, "What is that?" It's like, "Don't worry about it. I'll be on to another thing in 6 months." Um, but yeah, and that's the thing. I think it's like an innate thing, whereas like I straight up would be miserable personally, and this is not about like commentary on anything. It's just me. If I stay at a job and there's no advantage, like when I was at Tesla, I was actually I enjoyed working at Tesla. I was there for a year and a half, which is quite long for me. And I realized they weren't going to be able to, they weren't going to let me get maintenance because I had been fighting and I made friends with the maintenance people and I learned how to do all the maintenance tasks and stuff. And they weren't going to let me get it. So it was like, all right, I'm out because that's it. If you can't give me more and I could just stay here and make more money and just keep working on my businesses in the background, it's like, this isn't worth my time. So I dipped, and that was kind of the way that it worked is, I'm here, I'm learning an interesting skill, learning how management for a factory assembly line works at a high-tech factory is very cool. But if I'm not going to keep having opportunities to learn stuff, then I'm just doing labor. And if I'm just doing labor, you could have someone else do my job, right? I'm not benefiting in a meaningful way. So, yeah, I think people have an innate predisposition one way or the other. I would absolutely suffer if I picked something, if literally any of the first 20 things that I did when I was younger, if I just picked one of those things and stuck with it, I would probably have killed myself. Like, not even joking. I probably would be dead. Just because it was like, I had to find something that made sense. And it was just took a lot of experimentation, all this stuff. but that's just my nature. And I don't necessarily think that's better or worse. I think it's better in the context of doing the weird shit that I do, but certainly not better on like a resume or trying to explain it to people, or anything like that. So people are just have different natures, and those natures lead them in one direction or another.
Mhm.
And you just got to kind of figure out who you are, and knowing who you are makes a lot of the decisions much simpler, because then it's not like, you know, am I going to get where I want to go staying here? Am I learning? Am I making more money? Do I have career advancement opportunities? Do I have like skill advancement?
Mhm.
Does that get me where I'm trying to go with my life? Yes or no? Okay, then you can make those decisions because you know what you're looking for. So I guess the ultimate takeaway to that is like, figure out what you want and need and how to best accommodate those needs, or at least move towards accommodating them, right? As long as you can make diagonal progress. You can even move backwards if it gets you in a position where you have more room to go forwards, right? It's like Frogger. Sometimes you
Yeah.
can't just go in a straight line to get across the river, right?
Yeah, very good point there. And I mean, I think it's at the end of the day, it's just all what you make of it. I mean, and you explain yourself as a generalist, but just from talking to you for a couple minutes here, you're obviously very good at communicating, which would be more of a specialized skill. So that's awesome to hear. And yeah, you were at a factory at one point. You could have stayed there if you chose to. You obviously chose to pivot. Now you have factory experience. Hey, maybe at the end of the day that won't lend you any useful skill, but at the end, it's a story at the end of the day, so it's worth something. So I think it doesn't really matter if you're super specialized at something or generally good at a lot of stuff. It's just kind of what you make of it at the end of the day.
100%. Yeah, well, it's even that's the thing, is like I got some kind of takeaway out of all these things. Like working at the factory, like seriously, just having been somebody that worked on a lot of small teams, and then seeing, the Gigafactory in Reno, where there's 6,000 people that work here, and it's like, 6 stories tall. It's like 3 double stories, and you just seeing that you can make 6,000 people agree and work together and build these machines that are literally, like, some of them are like 2 or 4 stories tall that go through the floor and stuff. It's like, it's insane, right? Knowing that that's even possible, that was so inspirational for me. Even though, like, am I going to build a factory in my lifetime? And it's not on the agenda, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
But I got to see how like the management worked at a giant ass company, right? I got to
Yeah.
watch like the internal comms channels and like how they structured the departments, and what some of the conflicts came out of. Like, we had these middle managers that were just terrible, and that's actually super useful knowledge for when I was chief of staff later, because it was like, okay, well, I just spent the whole time I was there watching the hierarchy and how it all worked, and now I know a lot more about what good management practices are, right? So everything is a wonderful learning experience if you orient yourself as if it's that, regardless of what you're doing. No matter what, any job in the world can teach you something, even if it's only that is not the job for you, right?
Fact. That's facts right there. 100%. 100%. That Robert Greene approach, it all makes sense in the end. You put it all together, and boom, you got something beautiful.
Yeah, he's wonderful, by the way. I don't remember if you were here at the beginning, but I actually referenced him a bunch on the front end of this. But yeah, we went way over on time. I'm gonna start wrapping up because I've got some other stuff I've got to do today. This was really good. Thank you very much for
Yeah,
your questions and
those were
the
great
back and forth
questions.
here at the end, Philip. So yeah, but otherwise, thank you everyone for coming out. I
And
think I already said I was gonna leave too. So
well,
but
shout out to our latest follower, Andy, on
realist sense.
Twitch as well. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to wrap up here. Thanks everybody for joining us, Phil and Samantha and Zach, for sticking around and you're asking questions and engaging. We really appreciate your support and look forward to next time. Hope you guys have a great day and that the rest of the week goes well. We'll see you later.
Awesome. Thank you now.
Ta-ta.
Take care.
Ta-ta for
Love you all.
now.
Bye.
All right, we'll run the trailer and then we'll wrap up. Thanks, guys.